Next on Unsolved Mysteries, the strange case of a 21-year-old Army private who buys 2 handguns, waves goodbye to his girlfriend, and vanishes. Bruce Lee, his son Brandon Lee. They were legendary martial arts stars, and some say their shocking deaths were caused by an ancient curse. Strange lights over Arizona. The military says they're only flares. Hundreds of eyewitnesses say, no way. Alcatraz. For years, its chilly waters were considered certain death. But when 3 prisoners escaped on a makeshift raft, no one knows for sure if they lived or died. 5 cases with strange clues and bizarre twists, and secrets that you would never expect. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Fort Ord Army Base near Monterey, California. Private Justin Berg Winkle was a specialist, United States Army. 3 years after reporting for duty, he went A.W.O.L, absent without leave, and vanished without a trace. 3 months later, an unsettling clue. Justin's car was found gathering dust in the parking lot of a motel. It was odd. His keys were locked inside, along with his wallet, credit cards, and military ID.
No money.
You knew something was drastically wrong. And you knew, like, more or less that he had placed everything just the way he wanted it found.
Dog tag.
That's the way I looked at it.
So what could have happened to Justin Berg Winkle? When he enlisted, Justin set his sights on the elite combat unit known as the Rangers. However, within 6 months, Justin was yanked from the program after he was implicated in a shoplifting incident.
When I was back in language school, me and some buddies of mine.
Ultimately, Justin found himself assigned to kitchen duty, serving up meals to some 1,000 soldiers.
When they put him in the cook section, he really had a hard time dealing with that at first, but then he kind of refocused himself and said, well, if I want to be a Ranger, I'm going to have to get back in there and really soldier to get back there.
On a weekend pass, Justin met Yolanda Antunes, a computer science student at Santa Clara University.
There was a rapport there, and he asked me for my phone number, and I gave it to him, and then one weekend, we spent a whole day in San Francisco, and we knew, I knew that he was a great guy.
Before long, Justin was driving 85 miles from Fort Ord to visit Yolanda at every opportunity. But after a while, she began to see the first signs of Justin's secretive life.
All of a sudden, he'll just stop what he's doing with me in the afternoon, and he'll just say, I'm sorry, but I have to go up to Monterey and see some people, but I'll be right back. I'll be just saying, just like that, out of the blue.
Bye. See you at 4. Doing good.
And then he started getting more vague. I can't tell you. I really can't discuss this with you right now. I'm doing something, kind of secret, and I can't reveal it to you. Justin always had a briefcase with him. He would be very secretive about it. He would never open it in front of me. There was this one time, and I kind of angled myself just to turn and look over my shoulder to see what he was doing. All he's doing with that briefcase is taking pieces of paper out and shredding them with his hands, just tearing them into little tiny, tiny pieces. I mean, to little squares this small.
Whatever Justin was involved with, it seemed to be veering out of control. One day, Yolanda found him alone in the living room, sobbing.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
You okay?
No, yeah, I'm fine.
Then, a strange phone call.
The mission's off.
What?
Just tell him, the mission's off.
Hi.
Justin, you had a phone call tonight. Some guy called and said that the mission's off. What mission?
Damn it! Damn it!
Who are they? Who are these people?
You don't want to know.
Justin bought 2 handguns and more than 100 rounds of ammunition.
Might seen Berg, Winkle?
0430 hours. A few days later, Private Justin Berg Winkle failed to report for kitchen duty back at his base.
Now, this is the duty sergeant in the mess hall. Got an A.W.O.L, sir.
But for a man who had apparently gone AWOL, Justin was not making much of an effort to hide.
What are you doing?
In fact, he went to Yolanda's that same night.
But listen, don't worry.
Yolanda insisted that Justin call his parents.
I'm not A.W.O.L. I wouldn't do anything like that.
And he just said, I can't tell you anymore. He said, but I will straighten it out.
I just can't. I'm doing something very important right now. All right? You've got to believe me, and I'll explain it to you later.
I said to him, at least call Captain Heinzelman, you know, at least call him. And he said that he would.
Justin did call into the unit. He did indicate that he was going to come back and that he had a couple more things to do. Once he got them taken care of, that he was going to come back to the unit and report back in.
But Justin did not report back in. Instead, he remained at Yolanda's and made secretive trips back to Fort Ord.
What's going on? Let me help you.
There's nothing you can do to help me.
Then let me go with you.
I have to go, okay?
Justin!
You know the movie White Sands? Watch that movie, okay?
Justin had made the same strange reference to the film White Sands in a conversation with his parents.
It's about gun running, the FBI and the CIA, and this one's against this one, and you don't know who the good guy is, and you don't know who the bad guy is.
This movie features a briefcase-toting hero in the world of international arms smuggling.
Then I thought, are you working for the CIA? You know, it was all too confusing, but that's the only clue, if anything, that he's ever given me.
See you later.
8 days later, Justin left Yolanda's apartment at around 10 a.m., once again headed for Monterey. But this time, Justin Berg Winkle would never come back.
And I don't know if he ran away from the Army. I don't know if he was kidnapped. I don't know if he was murdered. I do not have one clue what happened to him.
The windswept outskirts of Monterey yielded one final clue in this puzzling case. 3 months after Justin vanished, his car was found in the parking lot of an isolated beachfront motel near Fort Ord. Justin's name did not appear in the motel register. His handguns were nowhere to be found, but surprisingly, his briefcase, which he seldom let out of his sight, had been stashed in the trunk. Tucked in Justin's wallet was his standard-issue military dog tag.
We were driving down one time in his car, and Justin had his dog tags, and he said, do you know what they're for? I kind of had an idea, but I just said, no, what are they for? And he says, well, when a soldier dies, they put in his teeth so you can identify him. If you ever see these lying around, that means I'm dead.
Is Justin Berg Winkle dead, swallowed up by a shadowy secret life? Or did he simply run away and cover his disappearance with a twisted fantasy plucked from a Hollywood movie?
I really don't think it's possible that he ran away. The 3 things he loves: he loved his mother, he loved his girlfriend deeply, and he loved his car. And in that day, he just threw everything away. Everything was gone. I just can't believe anybody could do that without any trace or anything.
If you have any information about this case, please log on to our website at Unsolved.com. Next, peculiar V-shaped formations of light appear over Phoenix, defying explanation and frightening hundreds of eyewitnesses. And later, the mysterious death of martial arts star Brandon Lee.
This is what I've been doing on a week's vacation.
This footage is from an actual videotape found on a highway near Stockton, California.
I've never run across anything as eerie as this tape. It frightened me. As a matter of fact, I thought about it that night when I went to bed.
Despite a frame-by-frame analysis of the video, investigators were unable to match the fire recorded on the tape with any suspected arson fires reported in California. The burning structure appeared to be a wood frame house, perhaps in a rural area, but no one knew exactly where it was.
I think the person who made this videotape and is responsible for the fire will, without a doubt in my mind, continue to set fires.
Update. Redwood City, California. Within minutes of our broadcast, several viewers from Redwood City contacted us and identified the location of the house seen burning on the videotape.
As we were sitting here and we looked at the film on the TV, we realized with utter shock that it was the house behind us that was on TV. And our family was scared, to say the least, because we didn't realize that the film even existed. And we called in to Unsolved Mysteries and gave all the information.
Investigators learned that the house that was destroyed was under construction at the time. By an odd coincidence, a local fire captain happened to videotape the same fire on that same night.
I had set up my video camera to film the fire for training and investigation purposes.
By comparing Captain Dullage's tape with the video shot by the arsonist, investigators were able to confirm beyond a doubt the fire's location.
Some of the calls received led us to a 17-year-old Woodside youth. We interviewed that youth. Through that interview, it led us to a 19-year-old Redwood City youth. He was arrested and interviewed and subsequently admitted burning the house, taking the video, and was the one who talked on the videotape.
The two teenagers were suspected of setting 24 other fires, but they were underage when the videotape was made. One served a sentence at a juvenile hall. The other was sent to a psychiatric hospital. Phoenix, Arizona.
All right, you tell me what it is.
March 13th, 1997, 10 p.m.
Oh, what do we got?
A man named Michael Kristen shot this videotape.
Before I noted, an entire display of lights comes on. I got a little excited at that time, and I called my wife.
Hey, Sue, take a look at this.
It was really quite unusual.
Michael Kristen wasn't alone. This videotape was shot around the same time, 15 miles away.
There's 4 of them. Look at the 3 of them all together.
I got the third one.
In fact, the bizarre lights were seen by thousands of Arizona residents that night.
An unexplainable series of strange bright lights seen over the skies of Arizona gets a lot of people wondering what the heck they saw.
Some thought these lights were UFOs. But not surprisingly, an official explanation soon emerged. They were not UFOs, they were flares dropped by the Air National Guard in a night training exercise.
What they were doing was dropping night illumination flares over the North Tactical Range at Luke Air Force Base. And a lot of people seem to think that those flares could in fact have been the quote-unquote mysterious lights.
Flares? Well, there's only one problem with that. The military said they dropped flares between 9 and 10 p.m. that night. The most impressive sightings, however, occurred much earlier, long before 9 p.m. 8:10 p.m. It was nearly an hour before the military would begin dropping flares. Ross Nickel and his family were on Highway 89 just outside Chino Valley, 90 miles north of Phoenix.
Hey, Dad, do you see that light over there?
Where?
Over the horizon.
Oh, yeah.
I saw some lights in a very small pattern, and what they really looked like at that point was some just dim stars, several of them in a very tight pattern.
Wow.
They were white like stars when they were coming towards us. And at that point, they changed colors and went from white to red. They were just overhead at that point, and they were, in my estimation, not very high off the ground. I'm guessing 1,000 feet. And there was absolutely no sound. During the whole time, from the start to the finish, there was absolutely no sound.
What is it?
8:30 p.m.
Those lights.
20 minutes later, 90 miles south.
Looks like a line of fighters.
A commercial airline pilot and his wife were driving home after dinner.
Are you sure?
I've been flying for 29 years now, and I'm not used to looking up in the sky and not being able to figure out what I'm seeing. I looked at it then and tried to make it into an airliner. I realized again, it's going too slow, and oh, by the way, there's no noise at all.
Definitely not fighters.
And then the next thing that struck me is that, and why would his landing lights be pointed straight down?
Ross Nickel and his family had seen the lights here. The pilot and his wife saw them here. It seemed to be on a southerly course. 14 miles southeast, a young woman and her boyfriend had another sighting.
What is that? It looks like it's gonna
Keep in mind, the military would not begin dropping flares for another half hour.
It was very clear in my mind that it was one solid craft. The lights were traveling two perfectly spaced apart, and there was a void clearly between the lights that blacked out the stars when it came down. The whole thing just slowed, I don't know, maybe to a stop, or it hovered for a second, and then what looked like one solid red oval object, it just turned red and shot straight up and disappeared, gone, completely gone.
"8:45 p.m., still 15 minutes before the military would begin dropping flares, and 80 miles south, another sighting.
Hey, Jimmy, you see those lights over to the east?
I tried everything I could to explain them away. They didn't look like floodlights. They didn't really look like spotlights. There was something different about them that I had never seen before.
If you lived in Phoenix, these flares, some of them were dropped at 14 and 15,000 feet. They burn very bright. They burn for 5 to 6 minutes. They are suspended by a parachute, and it's a large flare. You would be able to see those flares, I would imagine, for 150, maybe even 200 miles.
I'm certain that the lights that I saw were not aerial flares as used by the military. I've seen them from the ground, I've seen them from the air, and these weren't flares. And probably the major reason that these were almost certainly not flares dropped by the military was they're dangerous. They would never, ever be dropped over a population center.
The mystery of the Phoenix lights may never be solved. For the military, the case is closed. But for hundreds of eyewitnesses, the question remains. If they are not flares, what are they?
We've been sending radio signals out in space for over 50 years now, trying to locate intelligent life. So why would it be hard for us to think that at some point in time, somebody finally answered the call?
In a moment, the untimely deaths of legendary action stars Bruce Lee and his son Brandon. Could they be victims of an ancient curse? And later, a special Unsolved Mysteries report on legendary escape from Alcatraz. Bruce Lee. Brandon Lee. A father and son, linked by the action-packed world of martial arts films, and, some say, by an ancient Chinese curse that killed them both. Bruce Lee's film career began in Hong Kong.
I mean, you gotta put the whole hip into it and snap it.
He almost single-handedly created an audience for martial arts film and was an international star. When he was just 32 years old, he took a prescription drug for a headache and lay down for a nap. Bruce Lee never got up.
I was at the hospital when they brought Bruce in. I kept thinking, he's gonna snap out of this, you know, but I didn't know that he was already gone.
Bruce Lee's funeral drew more than 25,000 mourners. Some said that Lee died from a family curse. The first victim was not Bruce, but his older brother, who died as an infant. After an unprecedented 9-day inquest, the coroner announced his findings. Bruce Lee died from a freak allergic reaction to a pain remedy.
Here we have this paragon of fitness, you know, one of the most lethal human beings with his hands or his feet taken out, you know, essentially by a headache tablet.
At the time, Bruce's son, Brandon, was just 8 years old, and already he was following in his father's footsteps.
I started training with my dad really as soon as I could walk. I mean, my dad was a really diligent trainer, and he always had people over at the house practicing. In fact, I remember when I was a little kid, a lot of my friends didn't want to come over to the house because there were always these men out in the backyard screaming and breaking things, you know.
Like father, like son. Brandon followed Bruce's path to the big screen, and he himself was a star of martial arts films. Then, Brandon was fatally shot on the set of his 5th feature, The Crow, under mysterious circumstances. He was just 28 years old. Was he also a victim of the Lee family curse? Just like Bruce Lee's death, the shooting of Brandon Lee renewed speculation about the family curse. But can this tragedy really be attributed to supernatural forces? In a special television interview, detectives in charge of the case set the record straight. After nearly 50 eyewitnesses and more than a dozen ballistics tests, detectives Rodney Simmons and Brian Pettis pieced together the strange 6-week journey of the bullet that was destined to kill Brandon Lee.
They were filming a pawn shop scene, and they needed items from an actual pawn shop, so they went to one of the local pawn shops in Wilmington.
A stagehand gathered hundreds of props. Among them was a box of live .44 Magnum bullets. The first link in the fatal chain of events was now in place.
They dressed the setup with all the items that they received. They had placed the 44 rounds on a counter that was used in the scene.
Where'd these come from? Oh, we got those at a pawn shop earlier. These are live.
Stunt coordinator said when he found the live ammunition on the set, he was livid. The bottom line rule is that you don't have live ammunition on the set.
A stunt coordinator locked the bullets in the trunk of his car. But it was one of these bullets that would eventually kill Brandon Lee. A live bullet has a lead tip, a load of gunpowder, and an explosive charge known as a primer. When the trigger is pulled, the hammer hits the primer detonates, powder ignites, and the lead tip flies toward the target. 2 kinds of bullets can be found on film and television sets. Blanks are bullets with a harmless disc of cardboard instead of a lead tip and have a smaller gunpowder load. They may have 1/4 or 1/2 the normal charge. When fired, blanks create a visible but harmless flash. A dummy round looks like a bullet but cannot be fired. It has the cartridge and the lead tip only. No gunpowder, no primer. On the set of The Crow, the crew needed blanks. To save time, the fateful decision was made to modify the live rounds that they had. The crew removed the lead tip and the powder, leaving the cartridge and the primer.
And while they were making the blanks, they realized that they needed some dummy bullets also.
So what they did, they fired off the blanks that they made and took those casings and put the lead tips back in the casings. But what they didn't do was check the primers to see if they'd all been fired when they made the dummy rounds. So they got some mixed up. So they made at least one dummy round that had a primer still intact.
That one dummy round had an explosive primer and a lead tip. Then the crew used the dummy rounds for close-ups of someone firing a .44 Magnum.
What was that?
The detectives say that at least 2 people heard a popping noise. No one realized that it was the sound of a primer firing. No one realized that the primer had exploded with just enough force to dislodge the lead tip and wedge it into the gun barrel. There, it would remain undetected for another 14 days.
About 2 weeks after the second unit filmed the gun, the scene came up. It was a death scene for Brandon's character. And for this scene, the director chose to use a full-load blank.
They called for the .44 Magnum, loaded it with the full charge blanks. At this time, the lead tip is still lodged inside the barrel. He gives the gun to the actor.
That bullet being lodged in the barrel and that full-load blank, that was the equivalent of a live .44 round.
And it was projected out of the gun and into Brandon Lee.
North Carolina officials concluded that the film company's biggest failures were not having a gun expert on the set and taking shortcuts to save time and money. However, the chain of negligence involved so many people that convicting any one of them was unlikely. No criminal charges were ever filed. In the end, it seems that Brandon Lee was truly a victim of circumstance. Or was he, as some claim, the final casualty of the family curse? Next, the legendary escape from Alcatraz. For months, 3 men tunneled their way out of the notorious prison and then paddled away on a homemade raft. The guards say that they drowned in the icy San Francisco waters. But did they? San Francisco. In the bay sits the Rock, Alcatraz. Some say the nation's most notorious prison. It stands in the middle of San Francisco's icy cold bay. Its treacherous waters were the best guarantee that nobody would successfully escape. And nobody did. Until June the 11th, 1962. On that night, 3 men broke out of their cell house and vanished into the waves in a homemade raft. John Anglin, his brother Clarence, and Frank Morris, the brilliant mastermind of the escape, were never seen again. 10 days later, authorities discovered pieces of the raft. It had broken up at sea. The 3 convicts appeared to have swum for it. Did they make it? The debate continues.
If they went into the water, they were drowned within 30 minutes. They succumbed to hypothermia and drowned.
I felt that they didn't make it, but I thought we'd find a body. And we didn't find a body.
In the many years that have passed since that June night, no trace of Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin has ever been found. They may still be at large, and perhaps are still in hiding. Alcatraz was the most dreaded prison in America, and it was virtually escape-proof. 14 escapes were attempted, 8 men died, and all the rest were recaptured, except 3. Many former inmates believe the Anglin brothers and Frank Morris made it all the way to freedom.
If you call the Bureau of Prisons today, they will tell you no one escaped from Alcatraz. They made it. This is an embarrassment. Who's going to admit to that?
Don Dunevy, a professor at Merritt College in Oakland, co-wrote a manuscript about the escape with inmate Clarence Carnes. Carnes was a close confidant of the 3 convicts who escaped.
These guys made it. They made it because Clarence said they did, and I trust that.
Clarence Carnes spent 18 years on Alcatraz, arriving when he was just 18 years old.
Carnes was the most important inmate on Alcatraz. He had gained the respect of virtually all the other inmates because he knew how to keep his mouth shut. He was, in a sense, the godfather of Alcatraz.
Carnes said that the plot to escape began with an inmate named Alan West. West was assigned to paint the top tier of the cell block at the prison. One day while working there, he discovered that you can get access to the prison's roof by cutting around any of the ventilation shafts and pushing them out.
West noticed that the ventilation duct was constructed in such a way so that there were crossbars in between. You couldn't cut the bars. But West discovered that all you had to do was cut the entire duct from its surrounding support and just shove the whole thing out.
West enlisted the help of two brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, both convicted bank robbers who had a history of escapes from other institutions.
The Anglins were expert raftsmen because they'd grown up in the Florida swamp. They knew how to construct rafts. They knew how to negotiate currents. They were expert swimmers as well.
Perhaps the most pivotal figure in the plot was an inmate named Frank Morris.
He was a thinker. Anything connected with this escape that had any real brains behind it can be credited to Morris.
Carnes told Morris about a utility corridor that ran the length and height of the cell block. Inside the corridor were heating and water pipes that formed a makeshift ladder to a ventilation shaft. Morris knew they could dig through their cell walls to this hidden corridor during music hour.
In the early part of the evening, there was what they call a music hour. And anybody who had a string instrument could play. When that music is playing, it has an effect of deafening the officer who is making his inspections. The inmates that were digging were just digging away.
The Anglins, West and Morris, dug out the rear of their respective cells. West also used the time to craft false ventilation fronts to hide their work. The convicts devised another brilliant ploy so that they wouldn't be missed during head counts.
They decided that they would have to make dummy heads to be in their bunk, in case one of them was not in there when the guard would go by. This was at a time when the lights were turned low, and it would be difficult to recognize other than the face was in the bed.
Morris asked me about how you mix flesh tone. Because see, I'm an artist. I did a lot of oil painting on Alcatraz. I began to wonder, why is he so interested in flesh tone? And then I began to put it all together because they needed a flesh tone color for the dummy heads.
The dummies were made from soap, concrete powder, and stolen paint. One of the Anglins worked in the barber shop, and he swiped some hair to paste on the dummies' heads for an extra touch of realism. For the next 8 months, Morris and the Anglin brothers left their cells at night to drill out the ventilation shaft and to collect the items they needed for their escape. In his manuscript, Clarence Carnes wrote,
"Many times through the years I had met men who had tried to escape, but their flaw had been too little planning and being too hasty. They hadn't been thorough in their thinking, and that's what defeated them. But not this time."
In a moment, the dramatic events of June 11th, 1962, the day of the escape. Alcatraz Prison, 1962. For the guards on patrol that spring, the countdowns, the routines, the boredom were no different than any other time. But many inmates knew differently. During the days, right under the gaze of their keepers, they helped the 4 escapees in their preparations, secretly passing them raincoats. Using these raincoats, the men made their life preservers in their cells at night and then stashed them in the escape tunnels. In a secret workplace hidden by blankets, the Anglins and Morris took turns assembling a raft that were also made out of the pilfered raincoats. At last, the time to escape had finally arrived.
Time to go.
Quietly, the Anglins left their cells for the last time, and for the first time, Wes tried to slip through the hole in his cell wall.
Frank, what the hell's the matter? I can't get through. The hole's too small. Everybody's upstairs ready to go.
Suddenly, there's an iron bar that had been used as part of the reinforced masonry when the cell house had originally been built. No one knew was there.
Alan West, the original instigator of the plan, was stuck.
Frank, where's West? This hole's not big enough. He needs more help. No way. We're leaving.
Now the escapees had to figure out how to quietly inflate their huge raft. Frank Morris came up with an ingenious idea. He had received a small accordion, it's called a concertina, for use during the daily music hour.
They had taken the keys out of the concertina, and therefore you could put your hand on one strap of the concertina and push it up and down. It would operate just like a bellows.
Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin had made it off the rock.
It's a dummy! Dummy in 152!
The following day, an extensive search began. It was one of the largest manhunts ever.
We were ordered to go out on the bay and, of course, start looking around the island. And then over at Aidenville Island, scanning the beaches to see if anything that pertained to them might have washed up. It became evident that we weren't going to find them. Whether they had made it or not, no one knew for sure.
And for 24 hours, nothing was found. Then remnants of the escapees' raft began to surface. And so too did a controversy on whether or not the men survived.
The only weak point in this escape was the failure to really take serious consideration of that water out there.
The day after the escape, a homemade oar was discovered floating between Alcatraz and Angel Island. This paddle matched the one that the convicts had left behind in the cell block. 2 days after the breakout, a rubber-wrapped packet was also discovered floating near Angel Island. It contained an address book, 80 family photographs, and a money order that belonged to one of the escapees. 10 days after the escape, pieces of the convicts' raft were found only 50 yards off the east shore of Alcatraz.
Probably the earliest they could have gotten into the water would be 10:30. The outgoing tide started that night at 10 o'clock, and that outgoing tide is very strong. And I firmly believe that they were taken by the current into the Pacific Ocean.
The day of the escape, a Norwegian ship spotted a body floating 20 miles past the Golden Gate Bridge. Though unable to retrieve it, their description of it matched that of Frank Morris. But there is some compelling evidence to suggest that at least one of the men survived. The day after the escape, a man claiming to be John Anglin called a San Francisco law firm known to represent Alcatraz inmates.
He said, "I'm John Anglin, and I want you to contact the U.S. Marshal's office." I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that unless I know why." And he said, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "No." He said, "Read the newspaper," and he hung up.
A few weeks after the break, Clarence Carnes claimed that he received a postcard from the escapees. In it, they gave the prearranged code words that confirmed their escape. The card read, "Gone fishing." Clarence Carnes believed that the men had help from the outside, arranged by a convict on the inside.
Clarence shared with me that Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, underworld king of Harlem, had arranged for a boat to be out there to pick the Anglins and Morris up.
According to Clarence Carnes, the boat then took the convicts to Pier 13 in San Francisco's Hunter Point district.
My feeling is that's just something that Carnes has dreamed up and that there is not the slightest possibility there's any truth in it.
Alan West was interrogated repeatedly about Bumpy Johnson. He was also pressed to reveal any other contacts who might have helped the convicts. He denied any existed.
West wouldn't have copped out. West was people. He was solid people. To this day, I don't believe he ever told him nothing.
Today, the FBI and prison authorities have not changed their opinion. They believe that the men drowned within minutes of hitting the water.
Now, of course, we never are cocksure enough to say, well, we know they're dead. But we were pretty sure that they were dead because there was no trace of them whatsoever. However, they're still on the missing list and not the dead list.
Even though Alcatraz ceased prison operations many years ago, the infamous escape continues to puzzle investigators. In fact, over the years, thousands of leads have been investigated, but to no avail. Will this legendary case ever be solved? Maybe not. But for now, the arrest warrants for the three fugitives remain active, and the search for the answers goes on. If you have any information about any of our cases, please contact us at unsolved.com.